Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us for our press briefing with regard to the state's response to the pandemic. Before we get into that, though, we're going to start off with an update on the weather system that is moving into the state of Nebraska. That's why we got 511 up here on the screen. I've got Colonel Bolduc, who is in charge of the Nebraska State Patrol, here to talk about the weather and whatever we should expect. So, Colonel, will you please come up and give us a few words, please?
Great, thank you, Governor. Good morning, everybody. As you all know, the National Weather Service has issued a severe winter storm warning, and this covers a large portion of our more populated areas of the state. The latest projections are for the heaviest snow to start in the next hour or so, and will continue at a rate of more than 1 inch per hour throughout the day. Travel this afternoon and this evening has been described as difficult to impossible. Please do not attempt to drive in this storm unless it is absolutely necessary. If you do have to travel, make sure someone knows where you are going and the route that you'll be taking. If you become stranded and don't have communication, this information will help rescue workers find you. If you become stranded, please call star 55 and stay with your vehicle. Troopers and other law enforcement officials will stop for stranded vehicles. If you are not with your vehicle, it will be very difficult to find you. Our morning shift troopers all were called to duty early this morning. Our evening shift troopers will likewise be coming in early. We have closed all of our commercial vehicle scales so that those troopers are available to respond to incidents of stranded motorists or accidents. Most of those troopers are equipped with four-wheel drive vehicles, and so our motoring public will see troopers all along I-80 and the other state routes. Again, I have to reiterate, if you become stranded or have any other type of emergency, star 55 on your cell phone will summon a trooper to come and assist you. So far this morning, we have conducted 29 motorist assists for either stranded vehicles or vehicles that were stuck in the snow or slide-offs. As of 9 a.m., we had one motor vehicle crash. I want to remind everyone to be very cautious about snow removal equipment. Both the State Department of Transportation, our local city and county transportation departments will be out removing snow throughout the day. Please give these vehicles a wide berth, slow down, take your time, and do not travel unless it's absolutely necessary. I'd be happy to take any questions if there are any at this time.
Why don't we just do those at the end, Colonel?
Okay, perfect.
That'd be good.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Colonel. And again, my understanding is this is going to be one of the bigger storms we've had here in a few years, at least in the metro area of Omaha. So this is a big deal. And I think you were saying Nebraska City may particularly get hit hard with this. So if you're in Nebraska City, you really want to stay home. So, yeah, so okay. So thank you very much, Colonel. Appreciate it. As always, I want to remind people that we are still in the pandemic, that all the things we need to do to be able to slow down the pandemic apply. So please continue to be good about keeping that 6 foot of distance between you and other people when you're out in public. Wear a mask when you go to the store, wash your hands often. That's one of the ways that will help kill the virus. If you've got the symptoms like a fever or a cough, please stay home. It's very important that if you've got those symptoms of the coronavirus or the flu, that you stay home so you don't spread that. And then another thing I want to emphasize is that we've got great treatments like the plasma treatments or the monoclonal antibody treatments. If you are in that category that is 65 years or older and you start experiencing those symptoms, please contact your healthcare provider right away, because if you can get some of these treatments in advance, it is demonstrated to be able to reduce the number of hospitalizations. And again, as we discussed last week, the group of 65-year-olds and up are particularly vulnerable to this virus. So getting that treatment ahead of time will help keep people hospitalized or from being hospitalized, which will help make sure that we keep everybody healthy. So again, if you got that sniffle, contact your healthcare provider about some of these treatments. Obviously, avoid the 3 Cs. We want to make sure that you avoid those close contacts, crowded places, confined spaces. That's where the virus is going to spread as well. And Test Nebraska. We've delivered over 636,000 test results through Test Nebraska. Overall, in the state of Nebraska, we have crossed the mark where we have tested or done 2 million tests. So we've done a lot of testing here in Nebraska. Over 2 million tests have been delivered overall around the state. Our hospital capacity remains robust at 36% of our hospital beds are available, 35% of our ICU beds are available, and 76% of our ventilators are available. And that's what we do all this for, is to preserve that hospital capacity. And then finally, over the weekend, we saw that our hospitalizations dropped below that 10% threshold. So we went to 290, now we're sitting at 292 hospitalizations. So that means that we have fallen below that line, which would be the green line. And then if we stay there, the 7-day average stays there, we will drop down into the green category, which basically means that most of the restrictions are really off. The only thing that's going to be in place is the quarantining. But folks, that does not mean this is a time to let down our guard. We need to continue to do all the things we've been doing to be able to get to this point. So even though our hospitalizations are down, we want to continue to make sure we're wearing that mask when you're going out, you're keeping that 6-foot distance, you're washing your hands, staying home when you're sick, all that sort of thing to be able to help slow down the spread of the virus. So please continue to do that. Even though we're seeing good progress on our hospital capacity, we want to continue to do all the things that have helped us get here in the first place, which is slowing down the spread of the virus by following all the rules and using all of our tools. So please continue to do that. All right, so now, you may say, hey, the governor's wearing this yellow scarf. Is that because of the weather? And though it is kind of handy to have this because of the weather, it's actually because it's School Choice Week here in Nebraska. This is something we celebrate every year. That here we would like to reach that goal of allowing a child and the parents to be able to have that choice in education, that educational freedom, to be able to attend the school of their choice. Now, we've got a lot of great public schools here in the state of Nebraska that do a very, very good job. But not every child learns the same way. And your zip code should not determine that choice of educational freedom and where you go to school. Parents and kids should have that choice to be able to determine that. In this legislative session, I've got a couple of proposals into the legislature as part of my administration's initiative on this. The first is I put in the budget $2 million in each of the next 2 years, so $4 million total, for a choice scholarship program. Senator Linehan has introduced LB 364 as part of that, and there'll be a hearing on it later this week to be able to, again, make sure that low-income kids have that choice to be able to attend a school. So that's one of the legislative initiatives I'm proposing, is putting that aside in my budget. And the other has to do with the textbook loan program. We're essentially proposing to triple the size of that. This is a textbook loan program for private schools. Typically, it's funded at about $500,000 a year. I'm proposing over the biennium to fund it at $3 million a year. So it would take it from $1 million over the biennium up to $3 million. So again, assistance for private schools and homeschoolers to be able to get those textbooks so that they can have that opportunity as well. So those are two of my initiatives with regard to helping out with regard to school choice in this legislative session. Now, we've seen that around the country, a number of folks have stepped up to be able to provide that educational freedom, that educational choice to kids and parents around the country, recognizing that, again, your zip code shouldn't determine that choice of schools. And so we've got a couple of speakers here today. They're going to talk about that. Walter Banks Jr. with the American Federation for Children is going to talk about how school choice impacted him and that educational freedom impacted his life. He's from Ohio originally, and in Ohio, there are about 50,000 students that are taking advantage of private school choice scholarships, and about 100,000 students that are in charter schools. So a couple different ways to have school choice there in Ohio. So Walter will talk a little bit about that. And then we also have Rachel Terry, who is a parent who's going to be an advocate for school choice as well, talking about that from her perspective. So first thing I'm going to do is call up Walter, and then Walter will bring up Rachel, and we'll talk a little bit more about School Choice Week. But before I do that, I am going to sign the proclamation proclaiming it School Choice Week in Nebraska. and that will be starting January 24th to January 30th. All right. So we are officially proclaimed School Choice Week. All right. Now, Walter, you may know that typically we do this out on the west side of the Capitol. We have a big rally with lots of folks there, but due to the pandemic, and actually because of the weather today, we wouldn't have been very good to do it today because of the weather, we're doing this inside here today. It's a little bit warmer, but please come up and share with us your story with regard to school choice and what you've been doing to help make sure other children have the same opportunity.
Well, first off, thank you so much, Governor Ricketts, on behalf of students here in Nebraska for all the work that you've done and continue to do for students. My name is Walter Blanks, Jr. I am from the great state of Ohio, and I firmly believe that a high-quality education is the key to true success and a better life for children across the country. And I know that firsthand because I'm one of those students. Growing up in the public school system in Ohio, I was surrounded by poverty, crime, and very low expectations. I was in an environment where teachers would just happily pass me on to the next grade, whether I was ready for that grade or not. And I often spent time in the principal's office, constantly in trouble. I was bullied quite a bit. My family and I had this ongoing joke that they spent more time at the school than I did due to suspensions and being expelled. And so it was a pivotal moment in my life where my parents decided that something had to change. And in that particular moment, I'm a huge superhero fan. I went to school with this really cool Spider-Man shirt, and a couple of kids came up to me and were saying really, really nasty things, and the shirt ended up getting ripped off of me, buttons flying all over the place, and I was absolutely devastated. And I went home that day to my mom, and I was crying. I begged her. I said, please do not send me back to that school. I said, you know, I'll do the dishes every day. You won't have to yell at me about anything. Just please do not send me back to that school. And so in that moment, she decided that I needed to be in a better place. And so I often say that a desperate parent is a dangerous parent. And that's exactly what my parents were. And so with a lot of research, a lot of time, we found out about the scholarship in Ohio. And from 6th grade through 12th grade, I attended a private school. And in that school, my entire, not only my education trajectory, but my entire life trajectory changed. Before that, I didn't really have any goals. I didn't really know who I wanted to be or what I wanted to become. I was just trying to survive the day. But in that school, I took on an identity of my own. I began to play all different kinds of sports, instruments. I was in musicals and plays, Prince Charming and Cinderella. I even had the opportunity to go to Europe for 2 weeks, where I fell in the Seine River with a buddy of mine in the middle of February. But all of those experiences and all those moments have been pivotal in my education journey and in my life now. And so you fast forward a little bit, I graduated high school, graduated college, which statistically that's not a reality for people like me or the communities that I come from. And so now I've realized that I've benefited from a high-quality education, and now is the time to dip back into the pool and go back to the communities that I've come from to help lift up other children who are in that same position, the other Walters who are begging their parents not to send them back to the school that they're attending. And so I believe education is the great equalizer, but not just education, a high-quality education. And parents and students and children should not be limited to their schooling options based off of where they live, how much money they make, or the family that they're born into. And so now I continue this work where I'm able to engage with parents and families and elected officials to figure out how to expand schooling options across the country. And because of the experiences that I've had the strange desire, the crazy desire was what some people call it, to run for office myself. And continue that work and continue to inspire the next generation of ed reformers and leaders in our country. I believe that the highest human act is to inspire, and so that's one of my goals that I try to do every single day. And I'm inspired by the work that Governor Ricketts is doing here in Nebraska, especially because Nebraska is one of 3 states that doesn't have any school choice programs here. And so hopefully, Governor, soon that will only be 2 states, and then we'll get working on those 2 states as well. But thank you so much, and thank you for the opportunity to stand before you today.
We're going to go ahead and bring up Rachel.
Thank you, Walter, and thank you, Governor Ricketts. I'm Rachel Terry. I helped to found a grassroots parents organization to try to expand education opportunity here in Nebraska. I've been here about 9 years, and anyone who's got more than one child probably knows that school isn't going to be the same for each child. And some just sail through public school like it's meant for them, and it's a great option for them. And sometimes a child will come to a point where it's kind of an educational crisis, and there's not what that child needs at his or her school. And that happened to our family. And at the time, unfortunately, our kids qualified for free and reduced lunch. There was no way we could have afforded tuition on top of our property taxes that we're already paying for public school. But fortunately, we lived in a state at that time that had school choice, and so we were able to get our child into a school that was perfect and helped get through that educational crisis and back on track. And so when we came here, I didn't realize at the time that there were states that didn't have school choice, and it was difficult at times to find exactly what they needed here. And so I have been trying to help parents get what their kids need in various ways. We do have some options here. You can go to a different public school. There's homeschool. There's part-time homeschool, but those don't work for everyone. It takes a lot of time and money to do those things. And I really think here in America, all children should be able to get the kind of education that will help them to succeed. And so, like Walter, I hope that Nebraska will soon join the 47 other states, plus Washington, D.C., that have options for all children, not just the wealthy children. And I'm also really grateful for the textbook program. I've been in touch with a lot of families this year who have withdrawn their children from school because of coronavirus, and finding textbooks can be really difficult. Especially if you just don't have extra money laying around for education. So these programs are exceptionally helpful to families. And at this time when a lot of kids have missed some things and have some gaps in their education because school has not been the same this past year as it usually is, we need it more now than ever. And so during School Choice Week, I'm optimistic that our legislators will see the needs, the very real needs that we have here in Nebraska for our K-12 kids, and do some things that will really make a difference. Thank you.
Great, Walter, Rachel, thank you very much. Appreciate you both being here and talking about the importance of school choice and what it's meant for you and your families. That is something that, again, we want to make sure that every child has that opportunity to be able to get that great high-quality education in a way that is right for that child to learn. So thank you very much for being here. All right, so we did that. A couple other things here before we get to questions and answers. Just a reminder, I've got my radio call-in show today at 2 p.m. Central Time, so please tune in for that. Again, on Wednesday, I will be testifying in front of the Revenue Committee on LR 22CA. This is the constitutional amendment I proposed in conjunction with Senator Linehan to limit how much property taxes could go up in a given year for people. So that's going to be something to it's important to make sure that the property tax relief dollars that the state is providing are actually going to people's pockets. And then we'll have a briefing here back in this room Friday at 10 a.m. And let's see, we will also have a Revenue Committee hearing on LB 387 this Friday at 1:30 p.m. Central Time. So with that, I've got some questions that were submitted ahead of time. The first one is, several of them are from Grant Schulte from the Associated Press. Would you favor President Biden's plan to set up 100 FEMA vaccination sites throughout the country? In Nebraska, the thing that we can benefit the most from is to have more vaccines. You know, for example, Lincoln Lancaster Public Health Department did a fantastic job on Friday. They set up a mass vaccination center at the Pinnacle Bank Arena, and in a matter of 4 hours, vaccinated 2,400 people. The way emergencies are handled in this country is that they are locally managed, state supported, or, locally executed, state managed, federally supported. So if the federal government wants to help out, they should support us, but understanding that emergencies are dealt with at the local level. And when you give us the resources, like if you give us enough vaccine, you know, public health departments like Lincoln Lancaster will figure out how to get it done. So I actually, at least for the state of Nebraska, I don't believe that 100 vaccination centers is going to make a difference. You just need to get us the vaccine so we can get people vaccinated. Are you receiving fewer doses than you were promised under Operation Warp Speed? If so, how many fewer doses? We are not receiving fewer doses. In fact, actually, we're receiving a few more doses of Moderna. I think originally we were promised 11,200 doses a week, and we're getting about 11,800 doses per week. But still, in combination with the Pfizer, we're talking about 23,000 doses or so. So we would like to see that ramp up. Have you brought the issue to the attention of Operation Warp Speed, and if so, what do they say about the upcoming supply? And again, we've not had any issues with regard to getting fewer doses. We've been getting in pretty much what we've been promised on the schedule we've been promised, with the exception when we've had some weather in the past. That's slowed things down a little bit. And then his final question is, has supply kept up with demand given the expansion of eligibility? Well, again, the supply has been consistent with what we were promised. When we changed our guidelines to focus on 65-year-old plus, obviously that moves a number of people into Phase 1B. The demand has always been bigger than the supply, so if we can get more supply, we will vaccinate more people. Brent Bonfleur from KLKN asks, if we do get a major snowfall, will any impact on the state receiving vaccine shipment? And in the past, when we did have some weather, that did slow up some of the shipments, but we haven't had any indication yet that that's going to impact it. Obviously, if the interstate is closed down, that's going to make it difficult for us to get our shipments. But so far, we don't have any information that anything's been slowed down. Don Walton of the Lincoln Journal-Star. What can or should the federal government do to help speed up the pace of COVID vaccinations here in Nebraska? The single biggest thing they can do is get us more vaccine. Again, I'll point to what Lincoln Lancaster did on Friday as a great example of when we get the local public health department's vaccine, they get it out into people's arms. Douglas County is doing the same thing. They set up a mass vaccination center at, I think it's Christ Community Church in Old Mill, and they were able to deliver 1,000 vaccines in a 4-hour period. So that's where, you know, we're able to get those vaccines out. I was on a call last week with Douglas County. They're using up all the vaccines they get the week they use it. Where we've seen it being slower actually is the federal pharmacy program, because we have to bank our vaccines with the federal pharmacy program to get it out through CVS and Walgreens, and that's been a little slower than when we've been doing it through our local public health departments or community pharmacies, which is a Nebraska-based company. So I would say that that's been one of the places that's been slow, and also just making hospitals, when they get it, making sure that they're taking care of their shifts and not having side effects. So they've been had to make sure that they're doing it in a way that paces it. But once we get through the hospitals and it's just coming to the public health departments, I think you're going to see that this is going to go very rapidly. If we have the vaccines, we will put more vaccines out there. Taylor, any other questions? Text it in.
We have a couple more. Scott with KNAB says, in light of what we're hearing on the desire to keep a number of National Guard troops in D.C. in March, do you know how many National Guard troops will be staying there, and what are your thoughts on the request to keep guardsmen in D.C.?
So Scott from KNAB is asking if additional National Guard from Nebraska will be staying in D.C. There's been a request to keep more National Guard there. It's actually a volunteer program where the federal government has requested that anybody who wants to stay in D.C. can stay in D.C. So far, no National Guard from Nebraska has volunteered for that program, so they'll all be coming back home.
Paul Hamill is asking, why has Nebraska slipped in per capita vaccinations? We were top 5 at one point. Now we are 19.
So Paul Hamill's asking, why are we slipping in the ranks with regard to the vaccine program? And again, I think the two biggest things that are slowing us down are probably the federal pharmacy program, just making sure that gets out. And then, of course, just, the hospitals needing to be careful with regard to, if you've got a hospital shift, you don't want to give that entire shift the vaccine all at once. So that if they have a side effect like a fever or whatever, they can't come in. So they've been careful with regard to that. But I think that, again, based upon what we've seen from Lincoln, Lancaster, and Douglas County, when we get into the hands of the local health departments, they're going to use it up quick. All right. Questions from in the room? Martha?
About Nebraska slipping in the ranks. Obviously, other states have some of these timing issues with hospitals, and the federal pharmacy program is federal, so I'm not sure that I understand fully why Nebraska's falling behind.
So the question Martha's asking, gee, you've gone from 5th to 19th, and federal pharmacy program is something that all the states have to manage. Hospitals are part of for all the, nationally as well. Why should that make a difference for Nebraska? Well, those are the two places where I highlight those things, because that's the places where it's the slowest. Again, highlighting what the local public health departments are doing. They're doing their job as far as getting it out into the vaccines, getting those out quickly. And then I think also, if you go back and actually look at, things like the New York Times and the charts they're doing, there's probably a pretty tight grouping of the different states around the percentage of getting it out. So I think that there is going to be a little bit of volatility around that, because a lot of the states are in the same area. But I think that once we get through the federal pharmacy program and we get through our hospitals, you're going to see Nebraska is going to perform very, very well. Andrew.
It sounds like the rural areas are getting through their 1A quicker, because there are a lot of 1A people that are not choosing to take the vaccine. At what point do you divert some of those vaccines over to some of the heavier populated area, which has a little bit higher demand, so that they can catch up?
So the question from Andrew is, he's asking, hey, some of the rural areas have been getting through phase 1A faster. In fact, we've got 15 of our 19 local health departments, that are through phase 1A and have moved on to phase 1B. I expect 2 more will move into phase 1B this week, and then Lincoln, Lancaster, and Douglas, I expect to move into phase 1B the first week of February. And so the question is, well, are you going to take vaccine from those other public health departments and shift them to Lincoln, Lancaster, and Douglas to help them catch up? And the answer is, we actually distribute the vaccine based upon population that is being impacted. So Lincoln, Lancaster, and Douglas County will be getting a consistent shipment. They know what it's going to be. They can plan for it. For example, Douglas County is going to be getting 6,650 every week for the next several weeks. Certainly through February, unless vaccine production actually ramps up higher than that. And Lincoln, Lancaster will be getting 3,900, so that number will be stable. But we're making those allocations based on populations of people that are impacted in those groups. And so we're not going to be changing that based upon if, we have, for example, maybe in some places not as many uptake. What they'll do is, if they're in a public health director or a public health department that isn't using up all their vaccine on a certain group, they'll just move on to the next group. So, for example, if you've got healthcare workers that are taking up the vaccine at a lower rate in a health district, they'll move on to the 75-year-olds and get them vaccinated, and then move on to 65-year-olds and that sort of thing. So we're not going to be moving vaccine around the state. It's all based upon population, and that's how we're going to continue to get it out. Yeah, go ahead.
It sounds like there was a briefing on Friday with St. Francis, and the state is currently in negotiations. How confident are you that you have the money in hand at HHS to meet any types of deficit funding that they may need? And can the state afford $110 million extra to have them continue the contract for the next 4 years?
So the question was, there was a briefing about St. Francis on Friday. Our CEO of HHS, Danette Smith, spoke to the legislative HHS committee about the program and the additional money that we're negotiating with St. Francis to make sure that they can continue to take care of our families here in Nebraska and our kids is within our budget. So we have absolutely the ability to be able to handle the additional money within our current appropriation, so that's not going to be a problem. And then your follow-on question was, well, this is going to cost us more over the next 4 years or whatever time's left in that contract. And we will be able to, again, manage it within our budget the same way. And, you know, just frankly, the difference in cost in that is not much difference than what Promise Ship had bid as part of their contract. So the difference in those two contracts was not that much. So if we hadn't gone for St. Francis and gone with Promise Ship, we'd be paying almost about the same amount of money. Yeah.
And again, I mean, are you concerned about precedents that this might set where, you know, if a company bids something and they can't fulfill the contract, then you renegotiate and then you give them more money?
So the question was, are we concerned about a precedent here that if a company bids a contract and can't fulfill, we just go back and give them more money? I would say that this is probably more of an unusual case. You know, first of all, this happened with Promise Ship, the previous provider, where they came back and asked for more money to be able to take care of the kids. And we obviously know that the executives at St. Francis were fired because of financial mismanagement. So I think you've got kind of a unique case here. I don't believe this is going to set a precedent. Yeah, Martha.
Do you have any regrets now that you went with St. Francis rather than Promise Ship? Because if it's going to cost the same, Promise Ship scored better on everything except the cost when there were the bids. So presumably Promise Ship would have been doing a better job for the same amount of money.
So the question was, Martha asked, do I have any regrets with regard to going with St. Francis versus Promise Ship, since the cost of the contracts now appear to be relatively the same, and Promise Ship scored better on some of the other factors different from cost. And again, we made the best decision we could at the time we had the information. And at the time, St. Francis was the better bid, so we went with it. Yeah, go ahead. Martha, no? Fred hasn't been saying anything, so, oh, were you trying to say something, Fred? Okay, I'm sorry.
I was thinking.
Oh, okay.
I'm out of practice.
Wait, you were thinking you're out of practice? I hope you're not out of practice of thinking.
In the hearing on Friday, CEO Smith said that she had received verbal assurance that they would be able to fulfill the contract, but there was apparently some correspondence in which they said they would need more money at the same time. So is that a problem that the state accepted the verbal assurance when what was in writing apparently contradicted that?
So Fred's asking about a verbal assurance versus something in writing with regard to more money being needed. And I guess I'm not specifically clear on the timeline that you're talking about, like in July 2019. Is that what you're referring to? That?
I think it was July, yes. I listened to a recording of the hearing, but I wasn't there, so I'm not.
Yeah, I wasn't there at the hearing either. I will tell you that the state, went to St. Francis, had them come here, reviewed their finances, and so we dug into did our diligence with regard to their financials and believe that they were financially stable. They assured us that they were going to be able to do the contract. CEO Smith, told them, hey, when I think she called to their attention that they were running their expenses higher than what their appropriation or what the amount of money we were going to give them was, and they assured her, we're going to get it under control, we'll eat the cost of that. So you expect people to be able to live up to their word, and in this case, they didn't, and of course, those executives are no longer with St. Francis. So, obviously, we're going to continue to be diligent with regard to St. Francis. We're going to put more oversight on this to make sure that they are living within the appropriation that we're going to be giving them. But again, you make the best decision you can at the time you've got, and you expect people are going to be honest when they're telling you they're going to be able to live with it, and we're just going to have to continue to have oversight on St. Francis to make sure they continue to live up to their obligations. Yeah, Martha.
On the school choice bill, or the
So the question Martha's asking with regard to LB 364 is that the fiscal note on LB 364 is $10 million a year. I've only carved out $2 million a year in my budget, so what's the difference here? And what I put aside in my budget is, again, we're trying to balance off all the different needs of the state. So I set aside $2 million in each of the years for the scholarship program. Senator Linehan's bill is a little bit bigger in scope, and if she can convince her colleagues to have more money, there is more money available. Because I also left about $44 million within the budget for legislative priorities and initiatives. So if she can convince her colleagues to be able to take that bill up bigger, then she can have more money. There's money available to be able to do that. But of course, that's going to be a negotiation with her colleagues as well with regard to whether or not she can get the full $10 million. And you know, it's a whole legislative process, give and take, negotiation, all that sort of stuff on these bills.
In the past, opponents of this proposal have argued that it indirectly decreases the amount of taxes available for public education. What's your response?
So in the past, opponents have said this takes away money from public school education, and it's just not true. We fully funded the school aid formula. We do that every year, the TIOSA formula, the K through 12 education formula. I always account for that fully in every one of my budgets. That money is all there. And as I mentioned, in addition, if there are people wanting to do additional programs, there's money in the budget to be able to do that as well. So to say that this is somehow taking away money from the public schools just is not true. Andrew.
Just going back to the St. Francis negotiations, do you think you can have a contract signed by the end of the month?
So the question was, we're negotiating with St. Francis. Do we think we can have a contract signed by the end of the month? And CEO Smith believes that we're going to be able to get this all worked out and be able to make sure we're taking care of families here in Nebraska. So I believe that she's right.
And at what point do you think we should transition out of a private firm? Are you dead set on having a private firm handle the eastern service area?
And so the question is, do we think that we should have a private firm handle the eastern service area? And I would say that I'm still supportive of having a private firm have the eastern service area. And folks, just go back to before we had this relationship in the first place. I think one year we had 13 children in the state's care die. So remember, the reason this was moved to a private provider was because the state was not doing its job at the time. And so I think having that balance now between both the state taking care of kids and the private company taking care of kids has actually worked for the benefit of all children in Nebraska. Martha.
And along those lines, how can the state enforce the contract with St. Francis? So far, they have not met the terms of the contract, and they've asked for more money. And the state is giving them more money, and they still have not met the caseload standards, which was one of the big keys. So, with no apparent penalty, how can the state enforce this at any point going forward?
So Martha's asking, how can the state enforce our contract going forward? And that's what we're going to continue to work with St. Francis on. CEO Smith has been very clear. They've got to live up to their obligations. And so we're going to continue to work with St. Francis to make sure we're taking care of kids. But the expectation is they're going to meet the caseload standards, and they're going to be able to take care of kids, and they're going to do it within the budget parameters that we've set. So again, I think we've got a special case here where we had some executives that were fired for financial mismanagement. And also, this happened at a promise ship, the last provider as well. So we need to make sure that we're continuing to work with these providers to take care of our kids, but this is something that we're going to stay diligent on and make sure that they're following the obligations.
Time for just
A couple more questions. Andrew.
Can you ask
Colonel.
Colonel?
Yes, sir.
I guess, what kind of conditions are, with what the forecast is calling for, what kind of conditions are you looking at out there on the road?
So thank you. The question is, what's the reality on the ground out there for our motoring public and for our troopers? What are the conditions like? Well, as we speak, the snow is increasing in intensity. The rate of snowfall is increasing. So what we're going to see throughout the day are just deteriorating conditions. So what we're experiencing is more motorists being stuck on primary roads, secondary roads that haven't been plowed yet. Our interstate system is still functioning very well. We're keeping up with the snowfall. But at the time at which we're unable to keep up with the snowfall, that could change things. So what we're going to see is a continual decline throughout the day. And especially as you head east from Lincoln, those snow accumulations are going to keep piling up. And that's going to create very treacherous conditions for motorists. So the best thing that we can ask is use good judgment. Don't travel unless it's absolutely necessary. And if you must travel, do it appropriately, take precautions, watch out for snow removal equipment, and plan lots of extra time to get to your destination.
And if you do have to close some roadways, I mean, how much of a consideration do you take on whether or not those areas have the, I guess, the hospital, not the hospital, hotels and rest areas in the front?
So the question is, what considerations go into road closures? For example, are there enough facilities nearby? Should we have to close the interstate, such as hotels, places for people to go? Those are all factors that are considered by our partners with the Department of Transportation. And again, the goal is to keep the interstate system open and traffic flowing. As long as the snow removal equipment can keep up with that demand, that will be a factor. As you might know, sometimes in the western part of the state where facilities are not readily available, near the Wyoming border, we're dependent on the Wyoming Department of Transportation. If they close the interstate on the Wyoming side of the line, it definitely has impacts for us. That's a consideration as well. My understanding is the snow accumulation is not nearly as significant out west as it is here in the eastern part of the state.
And so do you have plans in case you have to rescue people, will you use your resources or is there a possibility you have the guard on standby to help out?
So the question is, what resources will we bring to bear in the event that we have to close certain roadways and commit rescues? Certainly, all resources will be brought to bear in that eventuality if that comes to pass. So we have the resources to accomplish that. Local law enforcement has the resources. If it became such that we would have to declare an emergency, the suggestion was, would the National Guard be available? Certainly, if it became that dire, that resource could be available to us as well. We don't anticipate that need, but we do believe that between the State Patrol, Department of Transportation, local law enforcement, we do have the resources to handle the demand that we expect. Ma'am.
Martha, do you have a question for the Colonel?
That's for you, Governor.
Thank you, Colonel. All right, last question. Go ahead, Martha.
Last question. Did you sign a proclamation for Public School Day last week?
Did I sign a proclamation for Public School Day last week? I was not aware it was Public School Day last week. I don't believe we signed a proclamation on that, did we, Taylor? Taylor?
Typically, our education proclamations focus on choice and educational excellence.
Yep, so typically our proclamations with regard to education focus on educational excellence and choice. All right, folks, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Again, please remember, even though we are falling down, our hospitalizations are coming down, please remember to continue to use all the tools we have to slow the spread of the virus. Keep that 6 foot of distance. Wear your mask when you go to the store. Wash your hands. Stay home if you got that cough or fever. Those are all going to be important to slowing the spread of the virus. Avoid the 3 C's. Get tested through Test Nebraska. We're still turning those tests around in a very quick period of time, 24 to 48 hours. These are all ways that we can continue to make sure that the number of hospitalizations due to coronavirus continue to go down. Thank you all very much, and we'll see you back here again 10 a.m. on Friday. Thanks. Thank you, Francis.